Okay. All right. It should be about 10 seconds and then we'll be going live. All right, everybody, welcome back to our final but super awesome authors chat for the 10 o'clock hour. We have Malaka Gharib here, and she is the author of the graphic novel I Was Their American Dream. And I've been having the hardest time saying this. It's an autobiographical graphic novel. Okay, I said it right. Yeah. So Malaka, do you want to just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Malaka Gharib. I'm a journalist, an artist, a writer, a zine maker. If you haven't heard of what a zine is, it's basically like a mini magazine. I make a lot of zines. I also make these tiny letters and notes, and I write stuff on them, and I leave them around the city. I also leave flowers around the city. I do a lot of just like little fun things like that just to entertain myself. And I recently wrote my first book called I Was Their American Dream, and it's all about kind of like a diary about my life as a Filipino Egyptian American. I never really thought about race before until the presidential election in 2016. And I just started hearing all these things in the media and from politicians and people in power about immigrants, and I just didn't really like what I was hearing. It didn't really match the experience that I had growing up in Southern California. Immigrants were being called, I'm Arab, so people were saying that Arabs were terrorists, that Asians were trying to take people's jobs, and it just didn't really match up with the really warm and loving family that I grew up with in California. So I wanted to sort of tell the story of what it was like for me as an average kid growing up in the US and what that experience was like. And I didn't realize at the time, before when I started writing the book, I realized that I had my own issues about what it meant to be American. I thought that I was never American enough and I would never pass as an American. But it wasn't until I wrote the book that I realized that, like, oh my gosh, like I'm American too. I don't know why I never put that thought together. I just thought about it and realized that from writing the book.
I love that. Yeah, the last author we had Adib Kram, and he was talking about how his own experiences and Iranian American like influenced his character in the book. And so like it was great that we got to talk about that because he's like, so this is autobiographical, so this is like your actual experiences. And I love that sense of like, well, everybody can relate to that whole self-discovery, like where do I fit in? And I really felt that in this. I kind of want to show just like some pages so that people can see. Oh, I got to go like that. Some of your awesome artwork.
Thank you. There I am.
Yes, I love it. I have a question. If you could change anything about the illustration of yourself, would you change anything?
That's a really good question. There's been a lot of conversation in the world of comics and women about how women portray themselves in comics. So, for example, comics have been traditionally drawn by men, and the characters of women drawn by men often tend to be a little bit sexualized and a little bit racier than maybe how a woman would draw themselves. And I felt like one of the things that people said to me was that you don't really look like your illustrated version of yourself. You don't really look like the drawn version of yourself. But actually, that's how when you have this picture in your mind of what you look like as a person.
Yeah.
And I always felt like this goofy, big-haired kid, and I realized that probably goes back to how I saw myself as a kid and a young adult. That image of yourself never really goes away, even if you grow up, in your 20s, and I'm in my 30s now. I still see myself as this like wide-eyed, kind of cracked out like person with like big hair and stuff. So I don't think I would change it at all. I feel like I kind of got to the heart of what my emotions were in my depiction of myself. But I'm also proud to like, what's wonderful about being a woman cartoonist is that you get to have control over how you're expressed visually.
Absolutely. I love that. That's a great explanation of like, people would be like, yeah, you don't look like yourself. And be like, that's how I envision myself.
Yeah.
That's great. I love it. I like all the characters and everything. Like I had just feel like this was a life happening. It made me super happy.
Thank you.
So I'm curious. You talk about going to Egypt and visiting that. Egypt, was it every summer that you went, or I'm curious about that.
So my mom lived in Los Angeles. She's Filipino, and my dad, who's Egyptian, moved to Egypt when I was around 9 years old. So my mom and my dad had this deal where I would come back to Egypt almost every other summer. So almost every summer, and I'd stay with my dad for the entire summer. So my mom would literally put me on an airplane by myself and fly me like out to Egypt, and my dad would pick me up at the airport. And it was like really wild. I mean, I think that Egypt is one of the poorest countries in the world and has a really high population of people living in poverty. So like the things I saw things in my life that I would have never seen had I not been there. And it was certainly different from the United States. So when we talk about poor people, I'm talking about like really, really poor people, like kids selling, selling soda in the street, and who
like
aren't
single cigarettes.
Yeah, and who aren't going to school, or people living in shacks or shanties like on the side of the road. I just never experienced that before. People who didn't afford to eat meals. It was really surprising. But there are also a lot of really beautiful things about Egypt too. I think one of the most amazing things about Egypt, if you'll ever get to travel there, is that the pyramids are truly astounding. Like you have these 3 giant pyramids in the middle of the desert, and it's amazing. We also have the Red Sea, which is, the water is like so green and crystal blue that you can just look right down and you can see the reef and the fish like in it, and it's like so beautiful for snorkeling. And the people are so nice and kind and amazing. And I think that like, I wish that you could travel to Egypt. It's really magical.
I want to go.
Yeah, it's really magical. And I had a lot of time actually reading. I used to pack library books, like suitcases full of library books, and would just spend the whole entire summer reading and rereading those same books over and over again.
I love that. That's great. I always love when authors plug books. I'm like, yeah. So can you tell us about like the process of like creating a graphic novel? So it's interesting because you write and draw it yourself. So you're basically consulting yourself. You don't have like an author and an illustrator that have to go back and forth. So what was that like, and like how did you write it? Did you like write things out and then draw, or?
Yeah, so I always kept a diary since I was a kid. So like since I was 8 years old, I always kept a diary. So one of the things that I did was to reread my diary and try to remember those moments that I was talking about. I also talked to my parents a lot to ask them about their history and their experiences coming to the US. And I talked to my aunts and my uncles and my grandfather and my grandmother about their experiences too. Like I asked my mom and dad, why did you come to the US? Why did you want to move here? Was the life that you had when you got here what you expected? What did you expect for me? What were your American dreams? What did you think an American dream was? And then I thought to myself, well, what the heck is my American dream? So I feel like when I was doing the book, it was really just asking myself a series of questions that I had never asked myself before. And that's what I think about. The only truth that I knew about writing a book is that writing is about discovery. If you don't discover anything about yourself, then how can you have your reader come along on that journey with you? So I made a lot of important discoveries in the book. One is that my American dream was different from my parents' American dream, and that like I guess like my parents thought that things would be so easy for me once they came here. They both came from some of the poorest countries in the world, the Philippines and Egypt. They thought that once I had a daughter here, that life would be easy street for me. But like I have my own issues being, you know, the daughter of immigrant parents, like trying to fit in and trying to understand, like, why do I look brown and everyone else looks white, and why is it better for white people to be white people, and do I get to be called an American too if I'm not white? I actually thought that I looked white for a while because I don't know what. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what I was thinking, but it and then it was kind of then just like drawing a visual diary of everything that I was learning about myself. So, you know, it was, you know, when you write in your diary, I'm sure lots of you write in a diary, like some of you write poetry to express yourself, maybe you write song lyrics, some of you write essays, maybe you just like write diary entries. But for me, always since I was a kid, the way that I would express myself is to draw pictures of myself in different situations, like, and then she said this, and then I was like this, and then I was like, you know? So yeah, so it just felt comfortable to be able to just express myself through just little drawings of myself.
I love that. So then does the organization come after then, or like did you make like a plan of how,
Oh, yeah.
and then like I'm gonna draw that?
Yeah, I never wrote a book before, but I have done a lot of zines. As I told you, they're mini magazines. And so what I thought of was that if I have 160 pages, that's so many like pages. I've never done that before. So what I'm going to do is just I'm going to break it down to 8 chapters of 16 or 17 pages each, and then I'll just pretend like each chapter is its own story of a different phase in my life. So all of the chapters are organized by like my parents, my childhood, you know, high school, and then college, and then my adult life when I get married. So I was going to organize it to like, I'm just going to tell the story of when I met my husband and, you know, moved to Washington, D.C., where I live, and just trying to explain that in 20 pages. And so that was how I organized getting the book done, just doing it that way.
And anybody and everybody who reads this is gonna be a fan of Darren, because I was like, it's the cutest ever. Like that was probably my favorite chapter. And then talking to your dad about Darren.
Oh my gosh, that really did find out about Darren in the most horrid way possible.
Oh, I love that though. So like people can totally relate to that when you like, by the way, I'm dating somebody and
Yep.
this might be not the person you expect. So
it was a disaster. But he got over it. It's fine.
So, does Darren think that he looks like how you drew him?
Well, everyone says Darren doesn't have red hair. And I was like, yeah, I know. It's a cartoon, people. Of course, he's nothing. The colors don't make sense. The colors are not going to make sense.
Oh, so did you do the colors for the?
Didn't. I hired somebody to do the coloring for me, thankfully, because
I like it. It's a good scheme.
Thank you.
It's like sets as well, because part of my like job is like disseminate like, it's so funny. I don't want to sound like a blog review, but I probably would, because like that's how I write blog reviews. It's like we do like a paragraph synopsis and then we like dissect it, like what's fantastic about it, and then read alikes. But yeah, no, I just it's funny, we talk about color scheme a lot and whether it suits like the tone of the book, and I think it really does.
Oh, thank you. I thought it's vibrant, patriotic for sure.
So you also have a job at NPR. Do you want to tell the teens a little bit about that?
Yes. So in addition to doing all my creative stuff that I like to do on the side because it fulfills me and brings me lots of joy, I also have an amazing job. It's my dream job, actually. I work at NPR and I write about people living in poverty in some of the poorest countries in the world. And I write about women's issues, global health. I write about gender equality, about war, about refugees. So, you know, a recent story that I did, for example, was about a girl in Malawi who Malawi is a country in Africa, a girl in Malawi who wanted to give up going to school because now that the pandemic has shut down schools across the country, her family is really struggling financially, and she thought that the best way for her to survive and be less of a burden on her parents was to just go ahead and get married. Even though she was 15 years old, she just wanted to get married so that her husband would take care of her financially and take care of her parents. And actually, the country of Malawi has a really great program where they team girls up with mentors, like old women mentors, and get them to, like, you know, if you have a problem at home, talk to your mentor and like try to find a way to work it out. And it's actually a great story about how this mentor was able to like help convince the girl not to get married and to do something else with her, find another way to make money, not to just take the drastic measure that might derail her from going to school. So
that actually makes me think of a recent graphic novel I read. But it's kind of the opposite. Like, she ended up having to get married, and she wanted to go to college. And she was going to get out of this this camp in Africa, and because she was really, really smart, but her father was like, no, you have to get married because you need to help support the family, and also, like, you know, you'll probably want to start your own family, so why not do it now? And I was like, no.
Oh no, I'd love to know what that book is.
It's so good. It's actually about, I think I have it somewhere.
Yeah, find it.
I know, right?
I also do a lot of comics journalism, which is basically like telling a story, a news article story, except you're telling it through comics. So I've been doing a lot of that. I did one about a refugee from Sudan, who basically was an orphan since the age of 6, and he was living in a refugee camp for most of his life until he was 17, and then he came to the United States and started a life here. It's really moving. You should try to find it if you can.
That sounds great. I think it's on the other couch. I'm literally, like, if anybody could see my living room right now, I'm literally surrounded by books and graphic novels.
That's a life. That's a life.
Yes, but I oftentimes joke that I'm going to fall over and, like, underneath, like, I'm going to implode from the weight of all of the books and graphic novels I carry around with me all the time. So that could happen. So does that mean you get to travel quite a bit for your job?
No, unfortunately, it doesn't mean I get to travel. There's a lot of different things I can cover on the phone, but I'd like to travel more eventually once the pandemic lifts.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's true too. That puts a hiccup in travel right now. So we have like 8 million questions, but like I feel like some of them are kind of boring. Let's see. Well, I guess, what was the most challenging aspect of when you were writing your graphic novel?
I think the most challenging aspect about writing a graphic novel or writing about yourself is that you don't really necessarily like the things that you learn about yourself when you write. I actually was really sad to reflect on my time in high school and realize that I spent so much of it being obsessed with white people and wanting to be like white people that I didn't think about celebrating what it meant to be Egyptian or Filipino. I rejected that part of my personality because I thought that it was less than or lower than being and trying to be white. And later, when I got married to Darren, and I didn't even consider it at the time, but I thought, why was it that I married a white person? I made such a life-changing decision to marry a white man instead of somebody from my own ethnicity where we could share values a little bit more closely. And did I only marry him because of the color of his skin, because I thought that I wanted to be closer to that ethnicity? And it really, 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 really put me in a weird, bad place. And I spent a lot of time with the therapist, like talking through that finding in my life. And ultimately, I realized that, you know, the Filipino and Egyptian in me, it represents itself also in the values that I have that are invisible. and the values that I have are in me that I know are from my ethnicities are that that family is really important to me, that I'm looking for somebody who is kind and who is good to their own family, who wants to have a family, who like just is a sensitive person. And I found all those qualities in Darren, and that his skin color really didn't really matter at the end of the day. So at least I came to that happy conclusion. But for a while, I was like, I don't like this. I don't like what I'm learning about myself.
Yeah, that's very true. And then reflect back on yourself and think, actually, we can ask that question now. I always ask, if you could go back and talk to your teenage self, what would you say?
I spent so much of my teenage self life feeling, I didn't know it at the time, but I was very lonely. I think that I found it really hard to relate to my peers. And even though I was surrounded, I didn't know this at the time, but even if you surround yourself with a lot of people, if you're not sharing your true self with those people around you, it can be very lonely. And I wish that I knew that at the time, and I would have been a little bit more open to share myself with others. I think that is, yeah, that's what I would say.
I think that's really great. You always wish you had so much more self-awareness when you were younger than you do. When I was talking to Adib last hour, we were just talking about, you could wish you were this person that was like, this is who I am, all the parts of me, and I don't care if I fit in, you're going to accept me as me, instead of being, how can I change myself to fit in with, everyone else? So it's like, that's what you want to get to. But it's so hard growing up and going through all those growing pains and kind of figuring that out.
Yeah.
I wish there was like a shortcut.
Oh God. Yeah. But then you wouldn't be the person that you are today.
That's exactly true. I know, like, it's like you have to go through all of those trials and tribulations. Like, you learn from that, and if you didn't have them, then you wouldn't learn those lessons. So.
Oh my gosh, there are so many things that I've learned in my teen years that I'm so grateful I learned back then to save me from so many embarrassing things now. Like all the times I put my foot in my mouth in high school, I'm like glad to have learned that lesson then versus now.
That's true. Are you working on any current projects with drawing and writing?
I'm thinking about writing a new book, and this would focus on just my summers in Egypt from the age of 11 to 21, and talk about, when I was in Egypt, I never took pictures because I don't know. I never brought a camera with me to Egypt to take pictures of my experience there. And because I'm a visual artist, I could at least recreate them in my own drawings and try to reflect back and remember them. And I want to understand what spending 10 summers in Egypt, what I learned from that as a person, what effect that had on my relationships with my family members, or how I see the world, or how I see myself. And I'm really excited about it. I'm kind of scared though, because I feel like my dad and my stepmom, they're going to be kind of weirded out by what I'm going to share. So I don't know. I'm a little nervous about that.
Yeah, that's always difficult. It's like, how much can you share about other people in your life? How much of their story can you share?
Yeah.
I'm excited. I can't wait. That needs to be a book right now, and I need it in my hands. Hands.
I have carpal tunnel on both hands, so I'm stretching them a lot.
I got my bachelor's in anthropology, so I'm kind of obsessed with learning about other cultures, and yeah, I do like the idea of spending enough time in a culture, and it really does change you. I've only been to my sister. I have a twin sister. She lives in Sweden, and I've only visited her 4 times. And I remember the first time I had like massive culture shock. And now, like, there's so many things I look forward to when I go there. So
that sounds wonderful.
Yeah.
Ooh,
did you have that culture shock when you first went to Egypt?
Yeah, definitely. I think the thing about Egypt that's fascinating for a lot of Americans is that the Middle East still seems very, very foreign and unknown. And there's a lot of stereotypes around Muslim women and Arab people. So I hope to just pierce right through the stereotypes that people might have in this country by sharing my own experience.
Yeah. So like, were you raised speaking Arabic, or did you learn Arabic?
Nope.
No?
I don't speak Arabic very well.
If I
Um,
could like do anything, I would just want to know like all languages so I could
yeah,
speak to everybody.
yeah. But I think that that's what is exciting about this new book is that, like, there's even if you don't have the same language, there's so much that you can understand about somebody without knowledge of religion or culture or language. There's so much about the human experience that you can have. Like, have you ever had that where you met somebody and like you
Yeah.
didn't necessarily, that you couldn't really connect, like speak to them, but somehow you're connected, you know?
That actually makes me think of when I was in Sweden, and my sister and I, she wanted to take me out for a girls' night with four other women, and it was just six of us sitting around a table, and I just had this like epiphany that like women around the world have like this experience, and just from talking about each other, and we're all from they're all from other countries, because Sweden does have like a huge immigrant population. Like one of her very good friends is from Latvia, and she has friends from all over. But yeah, I felt that. I was like, wow, like our lives are completely different, but we have this shared experience of being a woman and um, having these like same feelings about things, because of how we're treated by society. So that was really cool.
Yes, exactly that. There's so many things that transcend language or culture that you can just pick up.
Absolutely. Yeah, I know. Like, how do we in kind of just so like push humanity into people that have kind of left it by the wayside?
Exactly like the million
Come
dollar
on.
question. Yes.
Oh, well, so we're at our final question, which is, do you have advice for aspiring illustrators and writers?
Yes. You need to just start your own thing. Like start your own book. Don't wait for anyone to tell you like, "Oh, you should write a book now." Don't do that. Just do it. You do it, post it on your social media, tell people to Venmo you $5 for your story and then send it to them. There's social media has made it so easy for you to just like put your stuff out there. There's literally you have all the tools available to you. Just make it and put it out there and that's it.
I love that. And there's so many webcomics lately that have been published as
Yeah.
physical graphic novels.
Yes. Yes. That's what's amazing about it. And social media helps you be discovered by other people too. I mean, definitely don't do things for the fame, but like, a great place to showcase your work.
Absolutely. All right. So I'm going to remind everybody that we are giving away copies of all of the books from the authors, from today's authors chats. So there is the form you can fill out to try to win one of our giveaways. And wow, thank you so much for doing this author chat with us. We really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us.
Thank you.
All right, let's see.